I told myself the timing was never right, and then eventually never became the timing at all. So there I was, lying on my own couch, furious at my husband for a secret child when I was hiding one of my own. The hypocrisy of it hit me so hard, I actually laughed out loud in the dark, a horrible, broken laugh, because what right did I have to scream at him about cowardice when I had built my entire marriage on the exact same silence? The next morning, I didn't go to work. Neither did Thomas. We sat at the kitchen table again, this time with coffee neither of us drank, and I told him everything. I told him about Marek, about my mother's ultimatum, about the agency in Krakow, about the boy named Tomasz that I had held for one single hour 22 years ago and never seen again. Thomas didn't say anything for a long time. He just reached across the table and took my hand, and I let him, even though part of me still wanted to be angry at him and only him, because it is always easier to be angry at someone else's secret than to face your own. "We're both cowards," he finally said, "just about different things, at different times." "What do we do now?" I asked him, and I meant it about everything, about Isabella, about Zosha, about Tomasz, about us. We decided that morning that the secrets had to end completely, all of them, no matter how much it cost us. It was Thomas who said it first, that if he expected me to forgive him for Isabella, he had to help me find my son, because he understood now, more than he ever had before, what it felt like to carry a child you were never allowed to know. Telling Zosha was harder than either of us expected. We sat her down on a Sunday afternoon, and Thomas explained, in the gentlest words a father can find, that she had an older half-sister named Isabella, who lived in Winnipeg, and that he had made mistakes as a young man that he deeply regretted, and that he loved her, Zosha, with everything in him, but he owed her the truth about her family. My daughter, 14 years old, sat there quietly for a moment, and then she asked the only question that mattered to her. "Is she nice? Can I meet her?" Children, I have learned, often forgive faster and more completely than adults, because they haven't yet learned to build walls around their hearts. We flew to Winnipeg 3 weeks later. I will never forget standing in the doorway of Karen Reyes's small house, a woman I had hated in the abstract for exactly 4 days, and finding instead a tired, kind-eyed woman who had raised a daughter alone with dignity and had never once, in 13 years, asked Thomas for more than what he offered. "I'm not here to steal your husband," Karen told me directly the moment we sat down, because I think she saw the fear still living in my face. I stopped wanting that man for myself a long time ago. I just wanted him to know his daughter. That's all this was ever about. Isabella was 13, quiet and watchful, with Thomas's exact same eyebrows, a detail that broke something open in my chest the moment I saw it. She was polite to me, careful, the way children are when they don't yet know if they're allowed to like someone. But she and Zosha disappeared into the backyard within 20 minutes, and by the end of that first afternoon, I heard them laughing together over something on Isabella's phone. Two sisters who had existed in each other's lives for 13 years without knowing it, suddenly finding each other in a Winnipeg backyard on an ordinary Saturday. It was Karen, strangely, who helped me with the second part of my story. When I told her hesitantly about my own son in Poland, about the agency, about 22 years of silence, she took my hands the way you'd hold someone's hands at a funeral, and she said, "You should look for him, not because you owe him an explanation, because you owe yourself one." So I did. When we returned to Toronto, I contacted the adoption agency in Krakow, a process that took months and involved forms in Polish I hadn't written in decades, and a bureaucracy that tested every ounce of patience I had left. Poland had changed its adoption disclosure laws years earlier, allowing birth parents and adopted children to register mutual consent to contact, and I registered immediately, though the agency warned me plainly that there was no guarantee my son had done the same, or that he even knew he was adopted, or that he would want anything to do with me if he found out. I waited 4 months. 4 months of checking my email every single morning before I even got out of bed. 4 months of Thomas sitting beside me at night saying nothing, just being present, which after everything was somehow exactly what I needed. And then, on a Thursday in March, an email arrived from the agency with a name attached. Tomasz had registered for contact 8 years earlier. 8 years, and I had simply never known to look. His name now was Adam. His adoptive parents, a kind couple from Wrocław, had raised him with love, he told me later, and had always told him the truth about his adoption from a young age, though they had never pushed him toward finding his birth mother, only told him the door was open whenever he was ready. He had been ready apparently since he was 14 years old, the same age Zosia was now, and had simply been waiting for me to walk through that same door from the other side. Our first phone call lasted 3 hours. I cried through most of it, and so did he. And at one point, he said something that I don't think I'll ever forget as long as I live. He said, "I always wondered if you thought about me." I told him I thought about him every single day for 22 years, that I had held him for 1 hour and remembered every second of it. The weight of him, the smell of his hair, the way his small hand had wrapped around my finger. He was quiet for a long time after that, and then he said, "I'd like to meet you, properly, not just on the phone." I flew to Poland alone that summer, without Thomas, because some things a mother needs to do by herself. I stood in the arrivals hall of the Krakow airport, the same city I had left 22 years earlier with 2 suitcases and a broken heart, and I watched a 22-year-old man walk toward me with my own eyes and my father's exact jawline, and I did not have to ask which one was him. I simply knew, the way you know your own child, even after 22 years of separation, even after an entire lifetime lived apart. We didn't hug right away. We stood there, awkward, 2 strangers who shared blood and history and absolutely nothing else. And then Adam said quietly in careful English, "Hello, Mom." And something in me that had been frozen since I was 20 years old finally broke apart. And I pulled him into my arms and cried in the middle of that airport, like the 20-year-old girl I used to be, the one who had lost this exact moment 22 years earlier and never thought she'd get it back. I spent 2 weeks in Poland that summer, getting to know my son as an adult, a stranger who was also the most familiar person I had ever met. He was studying engineering, oddly enough, the same field as Thomas, though neither of them knew that yet. He had a girlfriend named Julia, a dry sense of humor that reminded me painfully of my own father, and a habit of tapping his fingers on tables when he was thinking exactly the way I do, a mannerism no adoption could have taught him, one that could only have come from the 20 weeks he spent inside me before the world ever separated us. When Thomas flew out to join me for the last few days of that trip, and Adam met the man who would become, in the strangest and most unexpected way, a kind of stepfather to him, the 2 of them talked engineering for 2 hours straight, while I sat back and watched, feeling something in my chest that I can only describe as a wound finally closing after 22 years of being left open. That autumn, back in Toronto, our family looked nothing like it had 1 year earlier, and everything about it was better for the honesty, even though the road to get there had nearly destroyed us. Isabella came to visit for Zosia's 15th birthday, the 2 sisters, inseparable now, sending each other memes every single day across the distance between Toronto and Winnipeg. Adam visited over Christmas, his first Canadian winter, standing in our backyard in a coat 3 sizes too big that Thomas had lent him, throwing snowballs at Zosha with the easy affection of siblings who had somehow found each other despite every obstacle life had placed between them. Karen and I became, unexpectedly, something like friends. 2 women who had once been strangers, bound only by a man's mistakes, now bound instead by the children we both loved fiercely, in our different ways, across the different distances life had put between us and them. Thomas and I nearly didn't survive that October, I'll be honest with you. There were nights that autumn when I genuinely believed our marriage was over, when the betrayal felt too large to climb over, when I looked at him across our kitchen table and saw only the 16 years of silence instead of the man I loved. But somewhere in the wreckage of both our secrets, we found something we hadn't had before. Not really, not in 16 years of marriage. We found the version of honesty that only comes after you've both stood at the very bottom of what you were most afraid to say out loud and survived it together anyway. I think about that Tuesday evening often, the one where I sat alone at my kitchen table staring at a bank transfer to a name I didn't recognize, so certain that I was about to discover the worst thing that had ever happened to my marriage. In a way, I was right, and in a way, I was completely wrong, because that discovery didn't destroy my family. It built a bigger one than I ever imagined I'd have, one with a daughter I raised, and a daughter I'm still learning, one with a son I lost for 22 years and finally found taps his fingers on tables exactly like I do, one with a husband who finally, after 16 years, let me see every part of him, the coward and the man who chose, eventually, to stop being one. If you had told me on that dark October night that within a year I would be standing in my kitchen with my whole scattered family gathered around one table, Polish and Canadian, sisters who found each other as teenagers, a mother and son reunited after 22 years apart, a husband who had finally put down the weight of a secret he'd carried since he was 22 years old, I would not have believed you. I would have told you that some secrets are too large to survive, that some betrayals simply end things. But I have learned, in the hardest way a person can learn something, that the secrets themselves were never actually the thing threatening to destroy us. It was the silence around them. And once we finally let the silence go, what was left underneath it, battered and imperfect as it was, turned out to be love that had simply been waiting, all along, for the truth to finally set it free.